I don't normally go down under the Iron Workers Bridge no more. There's some guys down there that are real psychos. But I was down there last night. I just wanted to get high, and I've burned a lot of contacts recently. A lot of people aren't happy to see me. So I was casting my net out a little further, and that took me down to the bridge. I had a couple of bucks, which meant I could still get some. That's all that mattered. Of course, I'd still have to watch my back once I scored. I was too broke to rob, but some guys, they'll do it just to fuck with you, even if you're high and dry. 'Cause some guys just like hurting people. Those are the ones you really gotta watch for. Under the bridge and around that area, there's a bit of a crowd. A couple of dozen at least. Some folks are basically residents. Others, like me, are just passing through, trying to find something or someone, or maybe not be found themselves. Real easy to get lost under the bridge. Nobody's gonna come looking for you, not unless they gotta. There's hard people down there. Scary, fucked up people. Tats all over their faces, shit and piss stains on their pants. Or maybe they got their act together, and they're just stone cold psychos. The kind that can't be anywhere else because normal people can smell the crazy on them. Can't trust anybody down there. The freaks are freaky enough, but there's worse than them. There's always something worse. Eventually I see this guy I know, Jerome. Part-time cook, full-time scumbag. Under normal circumstances, I'd go a mile out of my way to avoid him. But being as these aren't normal times, I walk right up to him. He's into all that white pride and Satan shit. Covered in cheap tattoos, and it's all swastikas and goat heads and weird old runic writing. And there's one that's supposed to be either Rob Zombie or some weird old magician guy. Cringe as fuck. He shaves his head like a Nazi punk from the 1980s, but ironically, his skin doesn't like that, so his scalp is always covered in acne and scabs. He smiles at me like we're buddies, and that really twists a knife in my gut. But even as I'm thinking about how badly I can't stand this guy, my hand is going into my pocket, pulling out my cash and palming it into his hand. He slips me back a little baggie. Meth and fentanyl, plus a little of his own homebrew magic. Fucking whatever. He shouldn't brag about that shit. But this fuck thinks he's an alchemist, like he's making magic potions. Probably pissing in his test tubes, and now I gotta smoke it and try to come up on it and not lose my mind thinking about maybe he dosed me with rat shit, just for giggles. I'm about to take off, but then it starts to rain, so I figure fuck it. Get high where it's dry, then face that other shit when I'm feeling better. I put my back to a pillar and made like I was asking Jerome if it was cool to hang out. Like I'm low-key asking if he'll watch my back while I get twisted, and he's telling me it's all cool, but I know I can't fucking trust this guy to do much more than fuck me up the ass while I go to tie my shoes. But you know, there I am, in his home, doing his drugs, and paying him, thanking him for the privilege. I got my own pipe, my own lighter, and I can watch my own back. At least at first. But I come up fast, and then everything's all glossy and smooth and feels a long distance off. It's ugly down there, under the bridge. But it's a beautiful sort of ugly, when you're all fucked up. And that, in its way, was kinda nice. For a while. I think I'd been staring out at nothing for a half hour or so when I realized one of Jerome's buddies had come over and was talking with my host. This guy was clearly part of Jerome's little inner circle, except instead of being a skinhead covered in pimples, this guy kinda looked like that tattoo of Jerome's, the one that might have been Rob Zombie or some crazy old magician. Anyway, I noticed, upon closer inspection, he looked a little like the goat tattoos too. This new dude was into that same scene, big time. Hands and neck were covered in ink, old ink, and all of it that same satanic Nazi vibe. He's a big motherfucker too, like large and wide and tall. He loomed over Jerome, practically loomed over the bridge. So I'm looking for the best way to start moving back towards a more civilized part of town when that big motherfucker comes and sits down right next to me. I guess I was sitting on the gravel with my back to the big cement column. I was high, so I don't remember sitting, but I guess I was. And then, this guy, he comes and sits next to me. Like we're buddies. I ain't never seen him before, but I guess now we're buddies. He lights a smoke and offers me one, so I take it. It'd be rude to say no, and besides, I could really go for a smoke. It tastes a little weird, like he got his sweat on the filter when he handed it to me. But beggars can't be choosers. So I guess now we are buddies, huh? Like we're old pals or something. Maybe he could have just sat there and we could have been cool. Two quiet little peas in a pod, just looking like silent badasses. Nobody would fuck with us. Nobody would dare. That would have been cool. Instead, this big motherfucker starts talking, and then he just goes and ruins my whole night. First, he asked me if I know about the race war that's coming. Says that when society falls apart, like it is, people are going to start returning back to the old tribal ways. And that means sticking to one's own kind. He says that's what the tattoos are all about. They're signifiers, so that people will recognize him for his breed. Like stripes on a tiger. He asked me if I got any tattoos, and I don't say anything. I need you to understand that. For this whole thing of him talking at me, I don't say anything. I don't look at him, I don't grunt or nod or nothing. I just sit there and he talks. That's what happens. For this whole thing of him talking at me, I don't say anything. He tells me there's this church deep under the city where all these rich and important men go to devil worship. The whole building is made out of old black metal, and it's built apart from the rest of the city in this big underground cave that's been there for maybe millions of years. He says they go down there to worship and pray and ask favors of this thing, and made it sound like it was this ancient, primal figure that's been around for longer than the human race. Like I say, it all sounded pretty satanic, but the more he talked, the more I started to understand that he wasn't talking about some fallen angel. It wasn't connected to any of that kind of historic biblical shit. It was something very different. He described something that sounded half human and half insect, like a bug that walked like a man. He said it didn't come from here, but it was like a king in its world. The king of everything forever. He said it's like the size and shape of a man, just a little bigger, and its body is covered in a shiny black carapace. That's what bugs have for their body, right? Like a suit of armor, with these massive antennae or antlers like a deer or an elk that function as both a crown and as a way to broadcast its own thoughts as a kind of psychic signal. A signal that can get into men's dreams and affect their minds. This thing lives in another universe, a place sort of like this one, except it rules everything there. Every rock and every soul, every molecule. It's got the whole place wrapped up in chains. But that universe is sick. It's been sick for a long time and now it's dying. Because this thing, this insect god king thing, it's like a cosmic form of cancer, eating away at everything that exists in that place. It's like a parasitic vampire, draining the whole universe of its resources. So now it wants out of its dying world and into ours. This thing, with how it can broadcast its thoughts, it can enter the dreams of people. And for years, for generations, it's been doing that. It looks for powerful people, powerful men and women, and using their dreams, this thing finds out where those people are small and afraid, where they're weak. And this thing gets a hold of them and starts twisting them, giving them orders. Down in the church, in the cave under the city, that's where these people go. Powerful people who rule the world. Industrialists, politicians, leaders of countries, police and military leaders. The signal that thing broadcasts is real strong down there. This bug, it broadcasts its thoughts inside their little monkey brains, and in doing so, it rewrites their thoughts. Tells them what to do and who to be, who to hate and who to kill. And the little monkey brains, they love it. They soak up that broadcast like it's pure serotonin and sunshine. There's a place, a special room in the back of that church where that thing, it can step out of its world and into ours for just a few moments. And when that happens, these men, these powerful men, they lose their mind for that thing. They fall all over themselves just trying to get close to it, licking at its shell until their tongues bleed, begging to serve it, getting up on it like it's some sort of cold, hard alien insect titty, and they need to suckle from it. And this big motherfucker, he explains to me that he knows all about this because he works for those people, for those powerful men. He's active on the street looking for bodies. They need bodies, fresh bodies, to tempt that thing to come over here for short periods of time. It can't stay long. Something about the atmosphere here, it isn't good for its shell. But if they dangle some live meat on its plate, it'll fold itself into our world for a few minutes to feed on what it's been brought. That's also why they're putting so much shit in the air and the water. All the carcinogens and the smoke and the plastic byproducts. Industrial pollutants? It ain't no accident. None of it. They're just terraforming this planet to make it more like home for that thing. That's why they held back the electric car, because King Bug Daddy likes to breathe the kind of exhaust that causes human babies to be born with no eyes or their limbs all fucked up. This big guy sitting next to me explains that it's his job, his duty, to find teenage runaways and junkies, real bottom dwellers who won't be missed by anybody. The kind of people who can disappear and it won't get reported because no one's going to notice. And that's what happens to them. They disappear off the street and they go to the church deep underground where they're fed, alive and screaming to a fucking space monster. A bug from another dimension that thinks it's a god. He's telling me all this, and then eventually I start to realize that it's because he's trying to recruit me. He's asking if I want a job. Then he says the money's real good, and he flashes a wad to prove his point. A bundle of hundreds and fifties all held together with a big blue rubber band. He says the job's easier to do if you're an outsider, a real degenerate fuck. I guess that's what he thought I was. He told me that he was brought up thinking white people were better than dark people, but then it turned out it didn't really matter since God, the real God, was a big black bug that walked on two legs and drank human blood like a tick. Fucking scumbag. He told me he'd give me some time to think about it, and that when I was ready, I should come find him again. Then he pulled himself up and lumbered away off into the dark. I just sat there twitching, all keyed up for a bit. My hands were sticky, and at some point I realized it was because I'd been gripping the gravel so hard, the rocks had cut into my palms. For a second I thought it was stigmata, like maybe I'd ascended and was becoming like Jesus. Like maybe I'd met the devil in the dark, and now it was my turn to shine. But that wasn't the case. There was no devil, and I was no savior. I was tired and fucked up and starting to nod off in a place where I was not safe to be in such a state. So I forced myself back up and headed out. Jerome said something to me, something real funny by the way he was laughing after himself. But I didn't register any of it. I just pushed through the night. I got the hell away from that bridge and those people. Spent an hour walking and wound up at the old library where you can get away from the rain by sitting behind the big wall that surrounds the place. That's where I found old Monty, sleeping off a bender. I guess some teenager had put a 20 in the old man's cup when he'd been panhandling earlier, and he'd spent it all on a good bottle of Ripple. He sat up with me, and I told him where I'd been and what I'd been told. I just had to get it off my mind. He said I should go into the library and use one of their computers to type it all down while it was fresh in my mind. I don't know. I can't imagine why anybody would want to hear any of this horrible shit. I sure wish I'd never been told any of it.